So our final section of chapter 1 of the bio unit is on pathogens or viruses. This just started at a page, so I'm just going to head to the second slide here. So how is this related all to what we're talking about? Well, we're talking about the body, so it doesn't really relate to the circulatory system, but it's putting it in here as something you guys should know a little bit about. It's really relevant to right now because we are in the middle of a pandemic in which it's all due to a virus. So this will be really relevant to sort of today. So there's different types of pathogens, and a pathogen is really anything that can cause a disease. The different pathogens pictures are right here. So we've got a bacteria, virus, and fungus spore, bacterial cell, and a virus particle. And then we've got our plant and animal cells. So if we look at them in comparison to the plant and animal cells, well, they're quite a bit smaller, especially a virus. The virus is quite small compared to the cell. And the cell that we would have are animal cells. So that virus has a lot of space to replicate. So some examples of pathogens, you have viruses, protozoan, which are a type of animal like protist, which is something we would have talked about in Bio 20, but maybe a lot of you didn't take that, so just know it's a just type of thing that could possibly be considered a pathogen in our bodies. Fungi, and then bacteria. So a vector is us, really. It's the organism that carries the disease, and that would be either the animal cell or the plant cell. So those are the ones that carry diseases from one person to another. And if we're talking about a virus particle, like COVID, for instance, that particle is dead. It's not alive. Viruses aren't alive. They need to be inside of a living thing in order to replicate or make more of itself. So viruses on surfaces, they're just dormant, or I like to call them dead. They're not really dead because they were never alive, but they're dormant there. And then when they can get into your cells, so that might be through your eyes, your mouth, your nose, any sort of way that it can get inside your body, that's when it's going to start to replicate. And that being inside your body, you're considered the vector, which can then pass it on to others. So it replicates a whole bunch and then makes copies to send it out to all of your friends. So not a good thing to be spreading viruses. I don't know why this is doing that. Anyway, we'll continue on here. So we got bacteria as the first one here. Bacteria are small, single-celled organisms with cell walls and cytoplasm. Their genetic material is floating in the cytoplasm, and they reproduce rapidly by splitting in two, or can grow exponentially. And antibiotics are something that can kill bacteria. So if you look at this picture right here, this is what a bacterial cell might look like. It's got not a lot of stuff inside compared to a animal or plant cell. It's really just got some DNA swirling around in the middle, and then cytoplasm is that jelly that's floating around inside, and they've got some other pieces to sort of keep them going. Bacteria are a living thing, unlike a virus, so we can actually kill them with antibiotics. So that is something that we can use. Unfortunately, with viruses, antibiotics don't work. Some different types of bacterial food poisoning are types of bacterial pathogens we can get. Salmonella, so you've probably heard of that before. That's inside of animal and human intestinal tracts. You can get it in high protein foods like meat, poultry, fish, eggs. To have salmonella, you would have diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, chills, and fever for 12 to 24 hours. So many of us might actually have had salmonella and not even known it. Sort of that's the common 24-hour flu. Gets out of you pretty fast, mostly because you're throwing up or having diarrhea. So that is something that would be considered food poisoning. Botulism, which is Clostridium botulinum, is botulism, what we call it, and that is something that can be found in soil, plants, marine sediment, and fish. And how you can get this is in preserved foods that aren't sealed properly. So a dented can or something I wouldn't suggest eating those things because this bacteria can start to grow inside of it. If you have botulism, it can give you blurred vision, respiratory distress, so hard time breathing, and possible death. So botulism, not a good thing to get. So really important that we take care of the foods that we're eating and make sure that we cook them properly to kill off bacteria if there is any. Listeria is another one. This one's found in milk, soft cheeses, some vegetables that are fertilized with manure. In their habitat, they live in soil, vegetation, and water, and can live for long periods of time. Listeria, I remember there being a listeria outbreak in I think it was Maple Leaf. I want to say Maple Leaf. I'm not very good at meats, but Maple Leaf, I believe, they had a listeria outbreak in their factory, so many people who ate meats, like deli meats and stuff from the factory, were getting listeria, which is flu-like symptoms that mimic meningitis, and people elderly and babies are most susceptible to it. So it's really not a good disease and definitely can kill you. That listeria outbreak did kill some people, so it took a while for that Maple Leaf to get back on track and selling their items, because who wants to buy stuff from someone who gives people listeria? The last one, E. coli. This one is pretty common. This is also known as traveler's diarrhea. This is in the feces of infected humans, so you get E. coli from humans. You can also get it from really any animal manure, so there's E. coli content from in water where they're close to farms, so the manure runs off into the water. So we can also get it from not cooking our food properly, so lots of meats, especially beef, we can get E. coli from, and then cheeses. This causes diarrhea, abdominal cramps, but no fevers. So that is what E. coli is. Protozoan, these are microscopic single-celled organisms that have a nucleus. Many can only divide or reproduce when inside a host organism. Many live as parasites. So a parasite is something that really just feeds off of other living thing. It's difficult to treat the disease without harming the host cells, and malaria is caused by a protozoan. So one of the ones that we know malaria, or we've heard of it probably. These are just things that are a lot of the times found in water, and they sort of use their host as a parasite. So they are the one that sucks the life out of their host. Fungi, are organisms that absorb food in solution directly through their cell walls, so they don't need photosynthesis. They live off the remains of dead things or decaying, but some are parasitic. So some fungus can have to live off of something that's living. Molds, mushrooms, and yeast cells are all examples of fungus, and athlete's foot is a fungal disease as well. So many different fungus that you can have. Fungus is not something anyone really wants, unless you like to eat mushrooms, then that's good, but molds and stuff are a common fungus that we will see. And I mean, if you eat mold, I guess probably depends on how much mold you eat, but it could be really dangerous. And there is different more dangerous molds than like our common like blue-green molds. Like our black mold would definitely be more deadly. So those are something to consider. There's always some more deadly fungus than others. Viruses, these are our last one here. So they're non-cellular particles consisting of a protein coat surrounding their genetic material that divides only within a cell of a living thing. They're extremely tiny. They're about 1/100th of the size of a bacteria. And antiviral drugs are used to try to stop the infection and stop the development of new virus particles. So I put in here coronavirus because that is one of the viruses that we're definitely seeing today. H1N1, the common cold, and then HIV and AIDS. So those are all different viruses that they don't live outside of the body, they just live dormant. So they're like sort of in like a frozen state until someone comes along, a living thing, that they can infect and use to divide. How a virus infects a cell, well, this is how it happens. So a virus attaches to the host cell. Their genetic material is injected into the cell, and it moves to the nucleus to attack it. It uses the DNA within the nucleus to make new parts of themselves. The cell viruses assemble, and then new viruses are free to infect other cells, so then they can burst out of the cell and infect. Okay? So as far as our pathogens in our body, but their body's first line of defense against pathogens is a physical barrier. So our skin is a huge barrier to protect us from pathogens. So when COVID was a big thing, people were all wearing gloves. I think that people thought that their skin wasn't going to protect them from the coronavirus, but the viruses need to be able to get into your membranes. So they need to get into like a cut or something like that. That's when you would want to wear gloves. But as far as your skin, you can wash your skin and you will be fine. So your skin's waterproof, it's acidic, so it kills things, some of the things that come in contact with it, and it heals quickly. We've got platelets in our blood, and we also have good bacteria that helps to fight off these bad bacteria. We have our nose. So in our nose, we have hairs and we have mucus that will stop stuff from getting through. In our ears, we have hairs as well, and we have wax, which is a type of sweat gland, which is to protect things from going in our ears. Our eyes, they have tears, so if something goes into your eye's automatically going to tear up to try and flush out whatever's getting into it. And our tears are antiseptic in a sense because they are pretty acidic. And then our stomach is also very acidic, so things that get into our stomach, they can be killed before they get into our intestines and stuff by our stomach acid. So how do pathogens spread? Well, there's many different ways. Our first one is airborne. So this is sneezing / coughing sprays the particles in the air. So we could breathe in, I guess, people's coughs and sneezes, their spray, their aerosol of their particles, which sounds really awful to think of, but definitely is a thing that could happen. We have direct contact, so it's touching someone or something that has a pathogen in it. But washing your hands is really a great way to prevent this type of transfer because you're going to wash it away before you get it into any of those places like your eyes or your nose or mouth where the pathogen can actually start to take effect. Bacteria in the food we eat, so that's how we can get pathogens into our body, and a lot of the times that's how some of us will get sick, more so in other more developing countries than ours, because we have sort of standards of cooking unless you're cooking yourself and you make yourself sick. But yeah, the bacteria in the food we eat can definitely make us sick. And then in our bloodstream, we have viruses like HIV and hepatitis C, and these can be spread through the bloodstream. So any sort of blood-to-blood contact can spread those viruses. So someone who has HIV or hepatitis, you need to have blood-to-blood contact with them. So likely not going to happen unless you're sharing needles with that person or something, or becoming blood brothers. So yeah, blood-to-blood contact, not really something that's going to happen to you if you're walking down the street. I hope not. And then our vectors that can spread diseases like malaria is spread by mosquito saliva, which is transferred during a bite. So a mosquito bites someone who has malaria, then they go and bite someone else who doesn't have malaria, and that malaria can be transferred to that new person. So if pathogens do enter the body, the immune response will be activated. This is a pretty intense process here, and I'm going to explain each step. So I guess it says it down here. Number 1 is the pathogen enters the bloodstream, and antigens on the surface of the pathogen are what the body recognizes. So this is the pathogen right here in the bloodstream. If I have this, that. So those antigens, these little spikes on it, are what the body is going to detect. So that little green part, whatever. But those antigens are what the body's going to detect, chemically detect, basically, to figure out what is there. Number 2, it says a macrophage, which is a specialized white blood cell, engulfs and destroys the pathogen, but not the antigen. So the second thing here, it eats all that green stuff. A macrophage is something that will basically get rid of the host and just keep the antigens. So then number 3, then the antigens are pushed to the outer membrane of the macrophage so that they can be detected by the helper T cells. So number 3 is this antigens are pushed to the outer membrane of the macrophage. In number 4, helper T cells bind to and connect information about the antigen. So right here, these are the antigens, and these helper T cells, those are the ones that are going to sort of find the missing piece in the puzzle to click those together to help the body figure out what those antigens are. Okay. In number 5, it says helper T cells send out chemical messages containing information about the antigen to the other white blood cells. And then the B cells receive the signal and begin to multiply. So these little chemical messages come out of the helper T cell, and they get sent to the B cell to tell the B cell to make a whole bunch of themselves. So this is where they say multiply. Okay, so then the helper B cell will multiply and will create antibodies to that antigen. Okay, I guess I should make sure I'm saying it properly. So B cells will produce antibodies for that specific antigen, and then the antibodies in the next step will attach to the antigen. So they've created these are our antibodies right here. They will attach to the antigen right here, and then the macrophage will come around and kill off that piece. Sorry. So the antibodies will immobilize and tag the antigen, then the killer T cells will detect these tagged cells, and the killer T cells will release proteins that puncture holes in the cell membrane, destroying the cell. Okay. So sorry. So back to here. So our B cells are created to create the antibody. The antibodies connect to the antigen. Then the white blood cell comes along and immobilizes the intruder, I guess, that has its antibodies attached. And then going from 9 to, where's 10? It's cut off. Then the antigens are presented in the tissue, so it's right here. So it gets rid of it and then puts the antigens there. And then the memory cell, T cell, will gather up these and will keep them on their surface so that they can remember that virus. So the next time it comes along, they won't need to do all these steps. They could just skip right to getting rid of it. So then the memory cell keeps that antibody around. And then number 12 is the suppressor T cell will come along and send a message out to say, okay guys, let's stop responding to this. Okay, so this is a lot of things to remember, but I'm gonna go through it really refresh you right now, as simply as I can. So, first step, the invading pathogen comes in. Second step, the macrophage will come along and destroy the invading pathogen, but keep the antigens. The antigens will be pushed to the outside of the macrophage, and then the macrophage will be bound to by the helper T cells. The helper T cells will figure out what kind of antigens they are. They'll send a message out, a chemical message, to the B cells. The B cells will create antibodies to fit that antigen. The antibodies will then be released. They'll be released and attach onto the antigens on the pathogen, or what's left of the pathogen, or the other pathogens that are there. Then the macrophage will get rid of it all, except for it will keep the antigens, or I guess it'll push it out to the edge of the tissue so that it can keep the message for the memory T cells, and then the memory B cells that will, again, remember it if it comes in contact with it again. And the suppressor T cell will be put into practice to let out a message to tell the body to stop responding. So then your body will stop creating so many white blood cells and you'll be okay. All right, so this is all right here. Sorry, I've got some writing on there, but this is all goes with the picture. So review that. I mean, I will put a video on Google Classroom about that. It's a little bit confusing, but something that is really important. So this is how, now that we know how immune responses work, we can figure out how to create vaccinations. And vaccinations, how they work, well, they're basically either put in as an injection of an altered or weakened form of the pathogen or an inactivated. So they might put a piece or a dead piece of a pathogen into you so that it can trigger an immune response. So that immune response that we just went over, I guess I can go back to here. So this whole response, your body does that when you get a vaccine, and it creates those little antibodies that we want. We want those antibodies so that when a virus comes along, like in full force, not a dead part of it, that we have, what's going on? We have like a piece of it, or we have the antibodies already present so that it can act faster to kill off the virus. So like our vaccines that we have, they might be working for us like a lot of the time, and we just don't know it because this is all happening in our body. It's not making us feel really sick because we've got these antibodies already present in our body to get rid of that invader. So some pathogens will require boosters to ensure the memory cells stay present in the blood. So over time, sometimes you might need to have a booster shot, and that's just to like put a little bit of the virus in there, that dead or harmless pathogen, to make sure that the memory cells have got the antibodies present. That's why you might notice if you get a vaccination, you might have sort of like a sore arm, or it might turn a little bit red. That's really your immune response. So your body is fighting off whatever that thing is that they put in your body, and even if it's a dead thing, at least it's got the shape and stuff so that your body will have those memory cells present and it will remember those antigens if it ever comes in contact with it again. Okay? So like super important that we get vaccinated so that we have that protection or that line of defense against something when it comes to us in its strongest form. Inoculation is similar to vaccination, but antigens is introduced into the body through a cut in the skin, while vaccinations are injected via a needle under the skin. So inoculation, I'm not sure if I've ever heard of really anyone getting it that way, but a possibility. And then there's some autoimmune diseases at the very bottom here. Some disorders in which the immune system produces antibodies against the body's own cells. So our immune system is really important to us because it helps us to stay protected against different viruses, bacteria, stuff like that. But when our immune response attacks our own body cells, that's when we can have trouble. So rheumatoid arthritis is one of them, where our white blood cells attack the bone and cartilage cells in our body. So that gives you a type of painful arthritis. Multiple sclerosis, this is where your white blood cells attack parts of your nervous system. Your myelin sheath is what it is, a part of your nerve, so that you start to lose the feelings there. Type 1 diabetes is your body manufactures antibodies against your pancreas. So your body starts to attack your pancreas, making it not work. So not good for any of those. So those are there's like millions of autoimmune diseases, but 3 common ones there that you might have seen in your life. And these are all things that your body is attacking its own self, thinking it's an invader when it might not be. All right. So that's the very first chapter of biology. The second chapter, we're going to be working on DNA, and we will start that probably tomorrow.